Washington's offensive line is officially the best in the nation.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. And before any of the everydayers ask, yes, I am in a new location. I am currently potting from Los Angeles, California, celebrating the holidays with my family. Happy holidays to you all. Lars, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today, and let's jump right into it here. The offensive line officially wins the Joe Moore Award, which is given to the best offensive line unit in the country every single season. This is just fantastic for this whole group and so well deserved.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It's so, I mean, they could have made an argument even to get it last year. And I mean, they gave up fewer sacks last year than this season, but this season, especially with what the offensive line had to go through, right? Because it's not like it's the Outland Trophy where it's just one, it's just Roger Rosengarten. It's just Troy Fautanu. It's just Parker Brailsford. It's a whole collection. And then you think about the fact that they replaced 3 of the 5 starters on the interior line. Mateo Mele goes down for the season. Parker Brailsford, a redshirt freshman who had only started 2 games at center or 2 games at right guard, had to then move over and play an entire basically season at center after not playing at all last year. So it's not just like a easy, oh yeah, well they got the highest, 3, all 5 stars or whatever. It's like, no, this is a testament to Scott Huff. This is a testament to the guys that he has brought in, the way that he's coached these guys up, and then also then to the players, obviously, for going out and making those statement blocks, opening those holes up. And because it's not just the pass blocking, right? The Joe Moore Award doesn't go to the best offensive line that gives up the fewest sacks, right? It's the best collection. And I think, and Scott Huff mentioned on Saturday that part of the thing is also, it's like, hey, the run game also got going. So, it's like, it wasn't just, hey, we're protecting Michael and the offense is passing ball all the way around the field. It was a collective run block, pass block effort. And I think that's probably ultimately won them the Joe Moore Award. And ironically, Scott Huff joked, you can't move that thing with 5 guys even. Like, not even the entire offensive line can move. He's like, someone's going to have to drive in a forklift just to carry that thing around. So
that's a gigantic trophy. What is it? 7 feet tall, 800 pounds. It's absolutely gigantic. So yeah. I think there are 2 things that we really need to talk about with this. One is, I know it's something we talked about a little bit on the Monday show where we felt like, especially Roger Rosengarten is somebody who didn't necessarily get the recognition that he deserved, where, even when we talk about Troy Fautanu, he didn't, he wasn't up for a ton of awards or anything like that. We know he won the Morris Trophy, but and he's also getting mentioned, really high in NFL draft circles. But Parker Brailsford and Roger Rosengarten are 2 guys who deserve a whole bunch of recognition. But also, to your point about the run blocking, we saw this group go from one of the worst offensive run blocking units over the first couple of weeks, where they were. I remember you showed me the PFF numbers where they were ranked grade 98th in the country. So we saw them get significantly better over the course of the season, which is just a huge testament to this group. But then also on top of that, Parker Brailsford has just been one of the biggest revelations, I feel, of any player in the country this season with what we've seen him do as a redshirt freshman. And then Roger Rosengarten is somebody who has flown under the radar in terms of NFL draft just conversations, but is somebody who just deserves all the recognition in the world for what he's done this year.
Yeah, well, I think the funniest part about Parker is the fact that Scott Huff and it's really, some coaches will say like, oh yeah, of course we saw this coming. It's like, but with Parker, they really kind of did. You kind of got that sense, even, to your point, talking to Roger Rosengarten in the spring when he's like, hey, Parker's the guy to watch. This is actually going to be a guy. And the ironic part was the conversation with Parker coming into the fall was he big enough? Can right. he hold up against some of these bigger, linemen that he's going to have to face? And I think by week 4, that wasn't even a question. Like, it wasn't Parker proved that point by being the top offensive lineman to break training camp. Just that's what, according to Brian Grubb, right? That's not just our opinion, right? That's the coaches saying that. And then on top of that, he just had to get a couple of games just under his belt. And I think pretty clearly on, you can kind of see why he was able to be the top offensive lineman out of everyone, because it's just so natural for him, right? There's no stage too big. We saw that in the Pac-12 championship game where Michael Penix Jr. had this quote tweet where he said, hey, like I want a lot of Parker Brailsford stock. I'm like, go back and watch the opening play as they broke the huddle. You could just look into, like, the camera shot perfectly at the offense bunched up, and you can just see Parker Brailsford's eyes. He was like, yeah, I'm winning this game. We are winning this game. And the offensive line played like that, right? Like that's how they won that game. They got that early lead, had to come back a little bit late, but the offensive line wasn't the question in that game.
No, you're absolutely right. So then that's something when, no matter who you and I have talked to about Parker, I remember when we were standing on the sidelines at the Washington State game, you had a nice conversation with Corey Luciano, who was just like, man, that kid's a beast. And then you talk to Julius Buelow coming into the Apple Cup week, where same thing, where he just said, Parker, he's the young GOAT. I love that. I love that kid so much. We love everything that he's done. And we just see what kind of a leader he is already. And, you watch the video of the offensive line receiving the Joe Moore Award, and who's the guy breaking down that group? It's Parker Brailsford. And just as a redshirt freshman, just the leadership that he has taken and just everything that he's been able to do for this group this season, it's really exciting to think that this is a guy who's going to be on the offensive line for at least another couple of years and can just really help. You can build outward from him, just saying, all right, Scott Huff can say, I know I have a solid center, and then I can build outwards from there and figure out what I want to do at other positions.
Exactly. Well, I think that's the one thing, you and I both know this, and Scott Huff stresses incessantly, is the ability to be versatile, right? Like, hey, I might be recruiting you as a center. Like, look at Landon Hatchett, was recruited as a true pure center, but was able to show that, hey, I can play interior guard too. I probably wouldn't put him at tackle, right? That again, probably could play tackle, right? But that
Sure.
seems like the third wrong option of that group. But the fact that you can play both guard spots and center, like that's versatile. And that's also important, because not only is that going to help you for the NFL, if teams say, hey, maybe we have an all-pro center, we'll get you there eventually, but can you start out at left guard? And there's no question. That's how you raise your draft stock. And so Scott Huff, basically every time he signs an offensive lineman, whatever they signed as, they come in at a different position. Like, it seems like, Miles Morale was an example where it's like he signed as a center, started him at guard. Aaron Hatchett was his guard or center, and they kind of switched him in between the two.
Look at Mateo Mele.
Mateo Mele is a perfect. And actually, ironically, Scott Huff, the comp for David Boyajian was Mateo Mele. A little bit smaller, obviously, in terms of he's not as tall as Mateo, but as versatile. And I think that's what really Scott Huff wants to see, and that's the guys that he recruits. I mean, we've said it basically for the last 18 months, where Roger Rosengarten could play left tackle if Michael Penix wasn't left-handed. So like, it's not like, oh, hey, you're the weaker tackle, so we're going to kick you on the right side and Troy's our guy. It's like, no, they're basically A1 guys. It's just a matter of what does the offense need them to do.
No, exactly. And then just staying on that Roger point for a minute, this is like, he's somebody who he got left off most of the all Pac-12 teams. He didn't necessarily get that national attention. And even you look around at some of the top offensive tackles that we're looking at in the 2024 draft class. You go down the list. There's Olu Fashanu. There's Talisi Fuaga. There's Joe Alt. There's Jordan Morgan. There's so many guys where it's, that's a name I know. I know that's a really talented player. Roger Rosengarten has the same level of talent as those guys. He just hasn't gotten that same level of recognition for one reason or another. And it's something where if he comes back, he should certainly be considered a first round potential guy in 2025. And if he leaves, he should still be a really solid day 2 pick with the way this class is shaping up. And it's really nice to see him in particular get some of that recognition.
And speaking of recognition and Washington not being able to play big boy football, and their opponents obviously in the Sugar Bowl, Texas having a massive offensive line advantage. Where do you think Texas and Washington finished the season in the run blocking grade for PFF? So with the caveat that, again, they started out 99th after the first 2 games.
I'm going to say Washington finished in the top 25 and Texas was top 60.
So you're close. Washington finished right on the money at 30. Actually, literally one spot behind Oregon. So Oregon finished with a 69. Oregon finished with a 69.3 grade, and Washington, of course, fittingly finished with a 69 grade when it came to run blocking. Gotta love that. But Texas finished 58. So yeah, so you got that one. But the fact that, again, it's Washington and then it's Texas. It's not the other way around. But they don't play big boy football out west, so we wouldn't know what we're talking about.
No, we've got no clue here. All right, Lars. Speaking of Texas, we're gonna have to talk receiver. We're gonna talk Aaron Butler because there's a whole lot to unpack there. But first, We got to give a shout out to our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. For all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Lars, you and I were on the show for a very long time talking about Aaron Butler to Washington and how that was potentially going to work out. We were figuring out ways to make it work. We saw Tayshaun Lyons obviously transfer out of the room, and you and I, one of our first thoughts was, oh, this looks like it might be the spot Aaron Butler was looking for. Then all day, it seemed just like, okay, well, when's this going to come out? When's this going to come out? As the day wore on, I don't know if we necessarily became less confident, but then all of a sudden around, 5:30, one of the Texas coaches tweets out his signature, just like Kalen DeBoer's woof. And a lot of speculation started to come out that was for Aaron Butler. So kind of an 11th hour flip sort of thing where he does end up signing with Texas. And yeah, there was just a lot going on there. I want to get your read on the situation.
Yeah. I mean, it really takes me back, right? Back in the, I say back in the day, but it's even, 2016, 17, when Byron Murphy, when he was waiting to sign until the last signing day, and, that 11th hour, always kids getting calls and things like that. I remember Jim Mora Jr. calling Jordan Payton, a wide receiver at Oaks Christian, and talking to him for like 6 hours the night before signing day. And he ended up flipping from Washington to UCLA after just committing to Washington. Right. So there's always crazy things that happen in recruiting. And I will say that, I think Washington felt pretty confident in getting him. And I think that's a fair assessment. And so, things happen in recruiting. I don't think, I've seen the reaction on Twitter where it's, how are we, not recruiting at this position? Well, it's not that you're not recruiting at this position. There's just, sometimes things out of your control, right? Now, this does open a potentially broader discussion, right? Of, okay, well, and again, this isn't necessarily on the coaches, but okay, is it a number that Washington didn't get to, right? Again, I know there were some people basically said, hey, you didn't have to drop the bag for Butler initially, and then now all of a sudden you have to drop the bag for a kid that you thought was going to sign with you. It's not that you don't want to drop the bag, but it's like, why are we doing this now at the 11th hour?
Sure.
But the devil's advocate argument to that is, well, that's what big programs do. You don't lose those players. You find ways to get them in. You make it work. You match the numbers. Now, if it comes out that the number was 1.5 or whatever, some ridiculous. Okay, I can see why. It's like Dylan Raiola ending up at Nebraska. No disrespect to Matt Rule, but it's one of those. Okay, if Georgia's not going to match 4 or 5 million, okay, I can see that, right? It's Georgia. Yeah, they can figure out the quarterback position no matter what. Stetson Bennett proved that. So is Washington in the position where, okay, we're not going to drop the bag as we didn't feel we need to, so we're just going to take our loss on this one and go find somebody in the portal? Or is this a message saying, hey, maybe, we should become the school, not like Oregon per se, right? But where the bag shouldn't be a problem, right? Okay, if it comes down to it, we're not a fan of it, but that shouldn't be the problem. I think the answer lies somewhere in between, because Washington will not be a bag first program, right? That's kind of just how this whole operation is going to go. But they certainly have the money and the cost to do it, right? So I think it's a matter of, situations are situational, as Chris Peterson always said. It's unfortunate, because I do feel like it was pretty much, we all kind of thought that Butler was going to Washington. And so and the other thing you have to consider with all of this is, even though Aaron Butler didn't take an official visit to Washington, he took multiple unofficials, and he never took a visit to Texas.
Right.
Texas was in his top 13 with Washington, didn't make his top 5. And then out of nowhere, it kind of was like, hey, we'll take that.
Texas is here.
Right. And so, it kind of just seemed like, okay, is it in kind of the not twisted route of it, but is this Texas overcompensating, knowing you're going to lose the Sugar Bowl, saying, hey, we're going to get a victory now, so we're not going to get a victory later? That obviously none of the coaches would ever say that, obviously, but like,
your words, not mine on that. But no, I think something that one of the points that you brought up that I think is something we really need to discuss here is talking about NIL, because there's speculation. We're not going to confirm anything because we don't have 100% certainty on anything when it comes to that decision. Let's be very clear about that. Yeah. But it's fair to speculate that not just in this situation, but in every situation now, because of the day and age of recruiting that we're living in. That's not changing. So for people who don't like that, you just kind of have to get used to it. But what we do need to discuss is Washington's NIL strategy. Their strategy seems to be portal first, high school. We're going to take kids that we really like. We like their film, that want to be here. Does that sound a lot like OKG? Sure. Will fans disagree with that in some sense? Sure. Are they wrong? Probably not. But when it comes but this is still the discussion that needs to be had, because when it comes to the transfer portal, we have seen this coaching staff be more willing to commit to say somebody else who did not sign. But again, that has nothing to do with NIL. Let's be very clear about that. BJ Green, where BJ Green did not sign in the early period, but from both of our sources, doesn't have anything to do with NIL. Not something necessarily that needs to be worried about. Seems like it could be figured out between now and February, and that's probably the reason that he didn't sign. So we'll just answer that question now, because I know somebody in our mailbag was wondering something about that. But that's all we can really say on that matter. But when it comes to something like Aaron Butler or somebody like Jericho Johnson, where it's just, okay, where sometimes it might be, hey, we're looking for the highest bidder. Not saying that's what it was in either of these scenarios. But when you're looking at that, Washington has said, we are going to allocate those resources where instead of just, we're going to go we're going to be the highest bidder for some of these guys, we're going to allocate that to a portal guy and then maybe look at that position next year and just say, all right, now we're going to hit this position really heavy in high school recruiting. Look at defensive line. Look at what they're doing along the defensive line, where they got 4 guys signed in the high school class. Dominic Kirks is also unsigned. And then they're still bringing in 2 portal guys, where one signed and the other one being BJ Green. So it's just a matter of strategy. And it's still too soon to say what works best. And I feel like we're not going to get that answer for another 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, again, the numbers that I threw out, the 1.5 and the 4 million for just throwing numbers.
It's all speculation.
Just using the examples, right? But actually, to your point, one thing about BJ Green, one of the reasons why he hasn't signed is similar to Aaron Butler. Maybe why he chose this again. These are other things we have. It's not just about the bag, right? So I don't think it's just about that, because I asked his dad a couple of nights ago. I said, how much will enrolling early and when that timetable might be, let's say if it's in January versus if it's in March, how much will that factor into the decision? So maybe it was a case where Washington could have got him in March. Texas can get him in January. I'm not saying, but these are other factors, again, similar to BJ Green. Hey, what are you missing? Are you missing something? Do we need X, Y, and Z? So there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. And again, it's more of a testament to, okay, if you're having a hard time deciding, when you can get a guy in, but you've gotten all these other guys in that are sure to be a good class, it's a sign of, okay, you're still an unquestionably good program. It's just a matter of, can you close that small little gap? But those are always going to come up. I mean, I remember, I forgot who it was coming out of, I think it was MJ Tafisi back in the day, coming out of Utah, where again, there was no NIL situation. It was more or less like hey, we just want to make sure, kind of just last minute, 11th hour natural things come up. So there's always things that are a factor. So it's not to say that, oh, Texas outbid Washington and that's the reason why he went there. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why he went there, right? And again, maybe it's Arch Manning. Maybe Arch Manning is like, hey, I'll be your guy. We'll be a connection, NFL. We'll both go to the NFL and do that. And it's not to say that Austin Mack couldn't develop that with Aaron Butler or Will Rogers or whatever. So I think, again, there's so many factors that went into it. I just want to be clear. We're not saying, hey, Washington doesn't want to put a bag in for a kid. It's like, whether it's a bag or not, there could be other factors as to why, and I know, and again, like we said, we know for a fact Aaron Butler liked Washington. The family liked Washington. So it wasn't for a lack of Washington. Sometimes it's a different fit or better fit in their perspective elsewhere. It's not negative on Washington. It's just like hey, some kids want to go to Texas. Evan Stewart was originally committed to Texas, went to A&M. Now he's going to neither. So it's like, this is a very active and fluid world of college football.
So really quickly, speaking of Evan Stewart, you and I both agree there's probably not a chance he's going to come to Washington. But when we just, with the situation that we just discussed, where it's all right, they're more willing to do, where they're more willing to allocate funds to, and just through NIL through the portal. Do you think that there's a possibility that they could get Jeremiah Hunter, who also entered the transfer portal for a year, the receiver from Cal? Because I think that's a pretty legitimate possibility at this point.
I was going to say, I think Hunter seems to be the target, especially with Meriwether going to Cal. It just kind of seemed like, okay, Hunter's like, okay, let me go take my opportunity over there, fill the Roman Jeans spot, if you will. But I will just say, I mean, I know we were texting last night. I'm like, man, can you just imagine the response? Like, hey, like all these questions about you, can UW do this X, Y, and Z? If they somehow got Evan Stewart, again, they're not going to, but I mean, just the ultimate, like, hey, okay, Texas, you can steal Aaron Butler from us. We're going to take a kid from Texas out here. Like just
right.
That, but again, that's not going to happen. But again, to your point, they will probably get Jeremiah Hunter. At least that they would be the betting favorites if I had FanDuel odds on that.
I respect that. And Lars, let's get into some mailbag questions before we get out of here. All right, we got some fun ones in here. First one is a nice little three-parter here from Paul Newland. The first part of that says, how does the overall recruiting strategy change as DeBoer and staff has been in place longer and has more of his guys?
I don't think it changes, right? I just think the level of talent that you have access to and that are now more that's the only thing that changes. I mean, the approach stays the same. They're still going to evaluate guys. They're not all of a sudden going to say, hey, now we're a college football top 14. Let's go get all the 5 stars and all of the 4 stars. It's like that's never going to be their approach. And by the way, I think they've proven, a lot of these kids have proven, hey, we can go find a 3-star like David Boyaji or Jalen Polk, if you will, and all these guys that, hey, maybe somebody else didn't want them. We'll take them and make them a 4-star. Like they don't have to come in with the ranking to leave with the ranking. And so I think it would be almost disingenuous of DeBoer if all of a sudden he changed and then it was like, oh, hey, now we're going to start offering maybe like 5 or 6 5-stars, or we're going to start bringing, even though you probably won't get them, right? It just looks good if you're recruiting a bunch of 5-stars. And it's like, well, is it worth the energy that you're going to put in knowing you probably won't get that ROI?
So that's a really good point, because you talk about somebody who they offered recently that seemed like a bit of a shocking offer they offered a month or two ago is cornerback Devin Sanchez from down in Texas in the 2025 class. Super talented kid, top 10 in the nation. Loved watching his film. But they're probably not going to get him, especially after he'd already released top 6 and then Washington offered. But you're right. It looks good to have some more of those. And maybe there are going to be more of those kinds of players that will consider Washington, as they make this college football playoff run, potentially make a national championship, all those sorts of things, where you can still throw out those offers and maybe they're going to be a little bit more willing to reciprocate between not only the college football playoff run and now moving into the Big Ten. Those seem like things where they're going to stick to their guns. They're going to stick to their strategy here because so far it's worked. And now the question is, all right, now can they continue to close on some of these bigger guys? I know somebody we talked about on the Monday show, Dijon Lee. Can they make sure that happens? Philip Bell, can they make sure those kinds of guys can come to Washington now? Or that's the biggest question in terms of, because the strategy is not changing at all.
Right.
Part two here. Okay. No, go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say the other part of that is whether you get Devin Sanchez or not, at least you're showing you're willing to establish those relationships in a natural area of Texas where you pulling guys out of before. So it's not like you're offering some guy out of the state of Florida that's like, Jeremiah Smith, right? Or the receiver that went to Ohio State, where it's like, okay, that seems like you're just offering him to say you offered the 5-star. Like, so at least you're doing it to where I can see it making sense. I just wanted to add that point.
No, I like that point a lot. All right, part 2. On what timeline should we expect to see recruiting rankings improvements, or do these even really matter for how DeBoer is operating the program?
So it does, and again, the also caveat being now that we're in this always ever evolving world of ranking college players and whatnot, you do have transfer ratings as well. So again, it's not the same as high school rankings, but there always is a way to balance out how you kind of rate out these additions. That said, I think the easy answer is 20. The 25 class will probably be the best barometer of what Kalen DeBoer is able to recruit to as Washington out of the high school level, right? Because he's proven he can do it in the portal. But now that year 3 in the program, you've worked through a lot of the COVID eligibility. A lot of the other guys that would be hanging around for their 6 years are probably going to be leaving. So now you have more scholarships to work with and more kind of, now, and you almost got a 2-year head start, right? Where you have to show recruits, hey, this is what we can do. We can't take a bunch of you guys. We might offer you, might even get you in the portal. And that's also where, again, it's always about relationships. Even if you didn't get these guys in 23 and 24, hey, maybe in 25, if it doesn't work out at your school, we can take you as a transfer instead of taking that kid out of high school because we like your productivity in college. And now we've gotten a chance to know each other a little more. So I think the answer is 25, but it's more or less, it's not, they're obviously going to be getting better players and as a result, better rankings in the system. But I don't think Washington's ever going to be that like top 5 class, top 7 class, just because there's always going to be those 3 and 4 star guys. Whereas, and again, it's a hard reality for some, but it is hard. And again, people will push back on this because Eugene sounds like it's harder to recruit to, but there is something about, the aura of Oregon and just kind of, there's nothing else there. So getting guys to come in, fly into Portland, drive down, do whatever, that always seems like an easy path somehow for whatever reason to get 5 stars on campus. But Washington does seem, it's a little harder for guys to, like a Devin Sanchez, if he all the way out from Texas, like, okay, I've already cut these schools down. Do I really need to make this visit? But the more that Kalen DeBoer wins, the more he becomes that Oregon brand of, hey, actually, you know what? Why not take a visit? Maybe I won't go there, but it's at least take an official visit out there and see what we can see.
That's a really good point. I like where you're coming from there. All right, let's get to part 3 here because we want to make sure we get some of these, as many of these as we possibly can. What does the ideal balance between transfers and high school recruits look like for this program? And will that change over time as the team moves further away from the Lake era?
I love the back end of that comment, but
that's clearly an everydayer who
I was going to say that's more or less just say moving on from the previous regime would be more accurate, but because again, part of that is also Peterson guys, right? So I think, so the question was, sorry, I kind of lost that there. The question was, will they be getting?
It's basically the ratio of high school recruits to transfers.
Yeah. So obviously, like kind of carrying on from that last comment, where it's like, the more you get into these 25, 26, and 27 classes, you're going to want to build more through high school. DeBoer has said that. He even said that this past Wednesday. It's like recruiting out of the portal is not sustainable. You're doing it to go get impact players at impact positions while developing the rest of your room, right? They're not going out and getting 3 transfer portal wide receivers to replace McMillan, Polk, and Adunze. You're getting maybe 1, knowing that your recruiting is going to lift it up. Again, same thing at quarterback where you're getting Will Rogers, but the coaches still love Austin Mack. So it's not like Mack is struggling. It's just, would you rather have an 18, 19-year-old starter coming off a potential national championship, or would you rather have a 1-year bridge like Will Rogers, who's thrown for top 5 yards in college football over the course of the Mississippi State career, and then let Austin Mack start for 2 years after that? Like, Austin's not going to be a kid where, I'm not starting, I'm going to leave. It's like that's part of also going back to some of these other questions. The types of kids that are offering are not changing. They're all the same types of kids. And again, to your point, are they OKGs? It's like, well, I mean, I don't know. That whole negative spin about that was like, okay, so what, you want to say you're a POS? Like OKG versus POS? Like, okay. Like, again,
no, you're right.
The old Miami teams would say, yeah, we want some dogs. Like, okay, well, you could still have some dogs. Josh Lair is a murderer on the field. Like, there's nothing about, like, these guys being soft. So it's like, to me that I can see the caveat, like, okay, hey, if you're not winning the line of scrimmage, if you have a weak offensive line, or if your defense isn't strong, clear characteristics of guys, like if your whole team, kind of like Alex Grinch, right? If your whole team can't tackle, then you might want to figure out that problem. But that's not necessarily the case with Washington.
No, you're absolutely right. So just to kind of like put a bow on that, it's probably going to be somewhere between, like, if we want to just put like an actual number on it, it's going to be somewhere between 75-25 of high school to transfer to 80-20. I would expect that range to be sustainable, where it's all right, we're plugging holes with guys like Dillon Johnson, guys like Sebastian Valdez, guys like Jabbar Muhammad, where those level players will be like 1-year stopgaps. Will Rogers, again, another great example, where you're still going to want to build and develop your high school classes, but patch it where need be, where maybe we missed on, somebody at this position where this is, I'm not saying they missed because I love Decker DeGraff, but like we're going to go out and get like a top tight end, like a Ben Urosek, where like, but no, it's really just, okay, we're going to let Decker develop and redshirt, and we'll see what we have in, Quentin Moore, because he's got one season left, plus Josh Cuevas, plus potentially what we can get out of Ryan Otten. So that's kind of where I would say we're going to see this transfer strategy continue. All right, we want to get to a couple more here. So real quickly, we're going to go to one here from Mandrake, where it says, I don't think it's an insult to say that the Huskies are unlikely to go undefeated next season. That said, what do you think the range is that they are likely to win next year? 8 wins, 10 wins, 12 wins? Just real quick record prediction for 2024 is probably the best way to go about this.
I think the bar last year was set at 10-2. Like it would be unfair to say, hey, they should win a national championship every year. But I mean, 9-3, 10-2 is pretty much, because I can't see DeBoer losing 4 games next year. Like they just,
right.
The talent is not going to be that far off.
No, you're right. Yeah. 9-3, 10-2, because the schedule is actually somewhat favorable too.
Yep,
it's not.
That's also part of it. Yeah.
All right. So let's get to one more here from the Drew C3, who also adds at the end, thanks guys. You guys made the season special. Hey, we really appreciate you for that. He asked a 5-part question here. We apologize. We can't get to all of those, but we wanted to end this on a fun, special note. So, because the 5th part of his question here says, favorite Husky bowl game memory. Lars, I'll let you go first.
I'm gonna be cheesy about this. So I'm gonna go back to last year at the Alamo Bowl, where after DeBoer had done his media, and I think I mentioned this before, but it really is true because it's symbolic. Where I gotten to know Kalen a little bit, as the season went on last year, and just off the record, on the record sort of stuff. And as we're walking out, he's like, we're just kind of having a casual conversation. I'm like, hey, just the beginning, and he's kind of smiling. He's like, just the beginning. And I think it kind of is symbolic for where this program, because he hasn't lost at all since, or he didn't lose last year, didn't lose since October last year, early October last year. So it's one of those, like, yeah, this is just the beginning. But he's such a chill dude to root for. So it's like, you can't not like the guy. So yeah, so a fun, lighthearted, cheesy memory.
So no, that's a great one. So mine is a little bit deeper, because as I sit here in Los Angeles, California, mine is the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, because I grew up watching the Huskies every single week because my dad is a Washington alum. My dad told me a very, very, very long time ago that, because we watched the Huskies through the mid 2000s, that whole era, that when the Huskies got back to the Rose Bowl, that we would go. I had never been to a Husky Bowl game. We were trying to go down to the Holiday Bowl when they got back after 8-9 years of no bowl appearances. So we went to the Rose Bowl for that last game, and that was just such an amazing memory. That whole day, doing the tailgate, doing just everything about that. And even though they lost that game, that is just one of my favorite memories of all time. So just wanted to make sure that we can close on a nice, happy note here. Lars, as always, thank you for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. It means a lot to us, and we're going to have so much more coverage coming to you throughout Sugar Bowl week. There's going to be so much more transfer portal stuff, as that next period opens in late January, whenever that is. So make sure you stick right here with us for all that, and to make sure you never miss out on anything, that you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you stay tuned for all your Husky needs. We got you everywhere, and make sure you just support us, help this channel out a lot. It does really help when you like the video, leave a 5-star review for your audio only, leave a comment down below. It all really helps us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.